Imagine this, you're hiking through the dense woods, lost in thought, when you stumble upon a village that isn't on any map. It's ancient, eerily quiet, and shrouded in an unnatural mist. Something about it feels wrong. Welcome to the Forgotten Village, where stepping inside means you may never leave. Let me tell you the story of someone who did, and wish they hadn't. David wasn't the adventurous type, but life had been mundane lately: work, sleep, repeat. So, when his friends suggested a hiking trip in the remote wilderness, he reluctantly agreed. Armed with a basic map, a flashlight, and a water bottle, he set off, determined to prove to himself that he could handle the wild. By the second day, the group was deep in the forest, far from cell service and civilization. David, eager to capture a perfect photo of the sunset, wandered off alone, ignoring his friends' warnings to stay close. The vibrant orange sky distracted him until he realized he couldn't hear the others anymore. He was lost. At first, panic set in, but then he remembered the stories his grandfather used to tell him about wilderness survival. Stay calm, retrace your steps, and listen for familiar sounds. But the forest seemed alive, whispering and creaking in ways that felt unnerving. Hours passed, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, David's sense of direction betrayed him. Then he saw it. Through the trees, faint lights flickered in the distance. Relieved, he sprinted toward them, thinking it was his friends setting up camp. But as he emerged from the thicket, he found something entirely unexpected: an old village. The houses were crooked and weathered, with thatched roofs and wooden planks warped by time. Lanterns hung from posts, their dim glow casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets. The encounter, David called out, his voice echoing into the stillness. No response. Yet, he felt watched. The kind of watch that makes the hairs on your neck stand on end. He walked cautiously into the village square. In the center stood a stone well with an ornate iron bucket pulley. A carved wooden sign above it read, "Do not disturb the water." The letters were worn, almost unreadable, but the warning was clear. Who puts a warning on a well? David thought, his unease growing. The houses around him appeared abandoned, their windows dark and lifeless. But as he approached one, he noticed something bizarre. The inside looked untouched. Fresh bread on a table, a teacup still steaming, as if someone had been sitting there moments ago. The whispering shadows, then he heard it. A soft, indistinct whisper. At first, it seemed to come from the forest, but it grew louder, circling him. It was a chorus of voices, speaking no language he recognized, yet the tone was unmistakable. Leave. David turned, shining his flashlight into the darkness. Shadows moved where they shouldn't. Figures darted between houses, always just out of view. His heart pounded as the whispers became a low growl, reverberating through his chest. He decided to leave. Running back the way he came, he realized with growing dread that the forest path had vanished. No matter where he turned, the village seemed to pull him back. The rules of the village a desperate, he returned to the square, hoping to find answers. On the well's edge, he noticed symbols etched into the stone, ritualistic markings he couldn't decipher. Suddenly, an old woman appeared. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow and unblinking, and her voice rasped like wind through dead leaves. "You shouldn't have come," she said, her gaze fixed on him. "I didn't mean to." David stammered. "I'm lost. Can you help me?" She shook her head slowly. "No one leaves once they've entered, but perhaps, if you follow the rules, they'll let you go." David felt a flicker of hope. "What rules?" She pointed to a parchment nailed to a nearby post. He ran to it, his hands shaking as he read the faded text. "Do not disturb the well. Do not enter the houses after dark. If the bell rings, hide and don't come out until it stops. Never speak to the children." Breaking the rules the first night was torment. David camped near the square, too scared to sleep. Around midnight, the bell rang, a deep, ominous toll that echoed through the village. Remembering the rules, he dove under a wooden cart and held his breath. The sound of footsteps followed, slow and deliberate. Through a crack, he saw them, tall, gaunt figures, with elongated limbs and faces twisted into unnatural grins. They prowled the streets, their movements jerky and unnatural. The bell stopped, and so did the figures. One turned its head sharply in David's direction, sniffing the air like a predator. Then, as if losing interest, it wandered away. By the second day, hunger gnawed at him. Against better judgment, he approached a house. The door creaked open as if inviting him inside. He remembered the second rule, but convinced himself that breaking it just this once couldn't hurt. Inside, he found bread and a jug of water, which he devoured. But as he turned to leave, he heard laughter, high-pitched, childlike giggles. He froze. Slowly, he turned to see 3 children standing in the doorway, their eyes pitch black. "You broke the rule," one said, their voice layered with something ancient and menacing. The curse of the forgotten. David bolted out of the house, but the village had changed. The streets were no longer straight, but twisted and endless. The whispers returned, louder and more mocking. Shadows loomed larger, some taking solid form. The children appeared at every corner, always watching, their empty eyes filled with malice. He stumbled back to the well, desperate and out of breath. The old woman was gone, replaced by one of the gaunt figures, who stared at him with a grin that stretched to wide. "You were warned," it hissed. "No one leaves." Panicked, David grabbed the well's rope, thinking maybe the water held answers. He lowered the bucket and pulled it back up. Inside was not water, but a mirror-like surface, showing his reflection. Only it wasn't his reflection. The figure staring back at him was gaunt, twisted, and grinning. A cold hand gripped his shoulder, and the last thing he heard was the sound of the bell ringing again. The aftermath. Weeks later, hikers found David's belongings near the edge of the forest. His phone, oddly intact, contained a single video. It showed him wandering the village, talking to himself. But in the background, blurred and shadowy figures followed him, closing in. No one who watched the video dared to go searching for the forgotten village. Some say it doesn't exist, but others whisper that it's still out there, waiting for its next visitor. Would you dare to enter?